Hi everyone and welcome to the channel. Now in today's video we're going to be answering one hopefully very simple question. You see, this is an AMD K62500 and this is an AMD K62500, but which is best? There's only one way to find out. So on the face of it, these two CPUs are identical. As I say, they're both AMD K62s, they both run at 500 MHz. They're both the same sort of micro revision, the AFX revision. Both got the same core voltages, and heck, even the date codes aren't a million miles away from each other. So yeah, put these in a system at stock frequencies and they're going to perform exactly the same. But what I want to find out is which one of these is the best in terms of overclocking. You know, which one of these has got the most sort of speed inside it. So what we're going to do, nice and simple, we'll overclock each one of these in turn and we'll see which one gets the highest overclock, or if indeed one is better than the other. I mean, who knows, they're identical CPUs, maybe the overclocking will come out the same on both. Other than this one here in my right hand looking a little bit sort of scruffy, it needs a bit of a clean up, this one. Just so we can tell them apart when we do start to overclock them. This slightly cleaner looking one here, I think we'll put a black dot on the underside of that one, just in pen, which I can remove with a bit of IPA when all's said and done. And the red one, or this one here, sorry, we'll put a red dot or a different coloured dot or something on the underside of that one. So here's our test system that we're going to be doing the overclocking on. If you've seen the Windows 98 build, the hardware video that we did on the channel a while back, this is basically just the guts of that computer but on the test bench. But motherboard wise, we've got the ASUS P5A. This is a revision 1.03, so it's got the Acer Labs Aladdin 5 SuperSocket 7 chipset on there. Still got the K63 CPU under there. That's going to be coming out so we can stick the K62s in. We've got three 128 megabyte sticks of memory, and before anybody chimes up and says, yeah, but the K62 can't cache all that memory, I know it can't, but we're not really looking at performance just yet. Let's you know, find out which is the highest overclocker of the two CPUs first, and then we'll worry about that a bit later on. Graphics card, that's Matrox G400 Max. Got a Sound Blaster Live and little compact flash to IDE converter with a compact flash card with the OS on it. I've taken an image of that card before we start, just in case everything goes wrong. Fingers crossed it won't, but you never know. So yeah, that's it. Nice and simple. As I say, we get that CPU off and get the first of the K62s in. So as you saw there, this is the first of our K62s, the one with the black dot on it, and booted it up just at stock speeds for now to check everything looks okay, which it does. So when it comes to overclocking these, just remember I am looking for which is the best out the two. I'm not looking at this stage to squeeze sort of every last megahertz of performance out of a particular chip. So I'm not going to be giving either of these two CPUs more core voltage. They're both getting the same stock voltage. Yes, these are still reasonably plentiful, but you know, they are old silicon and I don't want to sort of needlessly risk anything. So same stock core voltage for them both. Likewise with this cooler, they'll both get the same cooler. It's a Socket 462 cooler and it's plenty big enough to, you know, to keep these things cool. They don't kick out too much heat, these, even when they're overclocked, so that'll be fine. Again, perhaps with an even bigger or an even better cooler, you might get 1 or 2 more megahertz out of it, but that's not what we're trying to do right now. We just want to see which of the two is the best. Now when it comes to bus speed and multiplier, which are adjusted by this set of jumpers here next to the graphics card, and this set of jumpers, that one's bus speed, and this set of jumpers down here is multiplier. Again, I know I've said this before, but big shout out to whoever designed this, that not only did they not put dip switches on, they hid that little block of jumpers right next to the graphics card just to make it that little bit harder to get to. But yeah, what I'm going to do is we'll back the multiplier off a bit first so we know it's not limiting us. Then I'll up the bus speed, see how high we can get that, and then once we've sort of found that limit, then we'll start bringing the multiplier back up, see where we are, and there might need to be just a little bit of sort of final balancing between the two to find out the kind of best, you know, the best combination of bus speed and multiplier. Now with this sort of overclocking, it can be a little bit of a sort of trial and error process and can take a bit of time, especially when you're sort of nearing that limit and you're trying to find out where that kind of line or that limit of stability is. Because obviously you don't just want this thing to boot, you want to know that you can run some stress tests or some benchmarks and it's not going to fail. So I'm not going to show you every last little attempt at overclocking. I'll cut most of that footage out, and I'll be back in a minute and we'll see what this first CPU can do. So it looks like this is the best overclock we can get out of our first CPU, the one with the black dot. I've given it a test to make sure it's fully stable, which it is, and we've ended up with 115 megahertz bus speed, and that's on a 5 times multiplier to give us a clock of 575 megahertz. Definitely wouldn't do a 5.5 multiplier with 115 bus. Just wouldn't even boot at that, just beeped. Did try dropping the bus back down to 110 megahertz and seeing if we could get to 5.5 multiplier out of that, which would probably have given us just a little bit more speed, but it wouldn't reliably boot into Windows. It looked like it was booting, but it was just sort of the wrong side of, you know, the sort of edge of stability. So we've back down to this, and we've got, as I say, 115 bus on a 5 multiplier. So that's the first CPU done. Let's swap CPUs over and see what K62 number 2 can do. So there we go. Despite being identical models, it just shows that this one here with the black dot was the clear winner in terms of overclocking against this one here with the red dot. Now, final figures for the one with the black dot, it was 115 bus on a 5 multiplier for a total clock speed of 575. It wouldn't do 115 at 5.5, and nor would it do 110 at 5.5. It just didn't seem to like that, you know, that extra little bit. The one we're here with the red dot, we ended up going for 110 at 5, so total clock speed of just 550, and that's on a slower bus speed than what the other one managed to. Wouldn't do 110 at 5.5. It would do 115 at 4.5, which gave us, I think it was about 518, but that would again still obviously be much lower than the black dotted one. So, a couple of sort of interesting things drop out of this. I mean, first up, neither of these two managed to do a 5.5 multiplier at these sort of 110 megahertz and above bus speeds that we were trying to do. I think they would have managed it at sort of the stock bus speed of 100 megahertz. And likewise, as we sort of touched upon earlier, a bit more core voltage would probably have let them do it too. But under today's conditions, neither of them managed that. And the other interesting thing is that both topped out at the 115 megahertz bus speed. Now, ideally, we would have finer sort of adjustments, you know, finer control over the bus speed. And I'm sure, thinking back, there were some SuperSocket 7 boards that could do this. So on this one, for example, we were only able to adjust the bus in 5 megahertz increments. So 110, 115, 120, for example. I'm sure there were some boards that split that in half. So you could do 110, 112.5, 115, 117.5, and so on. It would certainly have helped just perhaps put in a bit more sort of clear water between these two CPUs, and again just fine tuning for that sort of that final overclock number. Now, I don't think it's the fault of either of these CPUs for that 115 sort of bus limit. I think it's an external factor, i.e. the motherboard or something else in the system. Now, I'm fairly certain it's not the RAM. This is all these 3 sticks are PC133 RAM, so they should be happy at running bus speeds, you know, up to 133 megahertz, and we didn't get near that, so it shouldn't be the RAM. I think the problem would be the speed that we were pushing through the AGP and the PCI buses. If we look at this page from the ASUS P5A instruction manual, you can see that as we change the bus speed, which is this kind of top block of jumpers shown here, as well as changing the CPU bus speed, it also changes the AGP bus speed and the PCI bus speed. You know, these buses are intrinsically locked together. Now, once we got to the Socket A platform, this started to become more and more of a problem. And chipsets then started to appear on the market where the AGP and PCI buses were decoupled from that CPU bus. So you could change a CPU bus without changing the AGP or the PCI bus. But that's not the case here. So if you look at the 100 megahertz bus speed, for example, we can see that our AGP and PCI buses are at 66.6 and 33.3 megahertz, which is their standard clock speeds. But as we go higher on that CPU bus, so once we get to 105 megahertz, our AGP has gone up to 70 megahertz and our PCI has gone to 35. And as we go higher and higher, that kind of overclock, if you like, or that running out of spec of our AGP and PCI buses also gets higher and higher. So at 115, our AGP is running at 77.6 and our PCI is at 38.3. And the 120, which neither of them could do, our AGP would be at 80 megahertz and our PCI would be at 40 megahertz. And that is well out of spec for most, you know, AGP and PCI bus devices. So I think given that when that was happening, when Windows tried to load, there were often loading errors, and I'm fairly sure that the IDE controllers on these are attached via the PCI bus. That's that kind of evidence of those errors creeping in when the PCI bus clock is too high. So I think that's where our limiting factor is coming in for, you know, for these CPUs in terms of bus speed, and not the CPUs themselves. So there we go, the Black Dot K62 CPU is the winner of this little overclocking contest between these two chips. But that is only half the story for this. In the next video, we're going to put this up against the most powerful CPU in the K6 lineup. It'll be the AMD K6 3 Plus. We'll do a bit of a comparison between the two CPUs, run a load of benchmarks, and then we'll see if the overclocked K62 can match up to the K6 when it's running at stock speeds. And then we'll overclock the K6 really let that one stretch its legs as well, and then we'll see how everything stacks up overall. But as I say, that's going to be in the next video. I hope you've enjoyed watching this one. If you have, give us a thumbs up or drop a comment down below. Just like me, I'm sure a lot of you out there were overclocking your SuperSocket 7 systems back in the day, or still are if you've got retro computers like this. I'd love to know what kind of overclocks you're all getting out of these sorts of chips. So yeah, let us know down in the comments. But for now, I'm just going to say thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.